everyone. Happy Thursday. It's another Techstrong kind of gang day. And we've got, the EU is on the warpath looking for some Microsoft scalps, it seems. We've got Broadcom still trying to figure out that VMware kind of puzzle. And is Nvidia sustainable? I'm not talking about their stock price. All that and more today on Techstrong Gang. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday edition of Techstrong Gang here. We're happy to have you join us. As I mentioned in the opening, we've got the EU on the warpath. We've got Broadcom VMware news, and we've got a little Nvidia as well as a special ROELBOB at the end of today's show. But before we jump into it, let me introduce you to our gang members for today. Our first up, I always like to lead with Mitchell. Mitch Ashley, who is a CTA with Vshpere Group, as well as our CTO here, and a regular on the gang. Mitchell, good to have you on today. Everything well?
Great to be here. Everything's great in Colorado State.
All righty. Well, starting off in Colorado, we're going to go further west where our next two gang members are today. They're both out in Cali in the Bay Area, I think. Let me first introduce you to our shiny new penny of an editor here, Jon Swartz. Jon,
I've never been described that way, but thank you very much for terming it that way to turn a phrase. Damn.
You've never been described as a pretty shiny new penny?
No.
Probably not. And then also joining us in California, she's been on with us before. She's from the Vshpere Group and a marketing expert and just a great, I enjoy having her on our shows with us. It's our gang member, Lisa Martin. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
Doing great, Alan. Thrilled to be back on the Techstrong Gang. Cannot wait to break into these topics today.
Fantastic. It's good to have you on. And then joining me here and in the Techstrong HQ in Boca Raton, Florida, not sunny Boca Raton, Florida, I'll add today, it's rainy, is our EcoTech Insights editor and analyst for sustainability and all things green IT, Bonnie Schneider. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, Alan. Great to be here.
Thank you for coming here and coming in. All right. So as I mentioned, the EU, these guys, they take no prisoners and they don't mess around. They are now after Microsoft for bundling teams, it seems. Jon, you wrote an article over on Techstrong ITSM around it. Why don't you kick us off here? What's the story?
Sure. I guess it's Microsoft's turn in the barrel with regulatory issues. So the EU, as you said, is investigating Microsoft's bundling of Teams to Office 365 and Microsoft 365. They think it's unfair competition for Slack and others. The investigation kind of dates back to a 2020 lawsuit that was filed by Slack, which has since been acquired by Salesforce. Microsoft did make some modifications for Teams in Europe, but apparently it wasn't enough. Now they're facing fines of up to 10% of their annual revenue, which would be about $20 billion. And it's scrambling to address the issue through its president, who's Brad Smith. Now, this interesting to me is that this is the same Brad Smith who, over the past several years, has adopted an almost holier-than-thou attitude about big tech adhering to regulatory laws. Well, Microsoft largely went unscathed. Microsoft's advantage was they had the big face-off showdown with the Justice Department in the 90s, predominantly in the 90s, and kind of learned how to stay on the good side of the law. But now they're target of the EU action. And it's interesting, Alan, because this comes a day after the EU admonished Apple for violating the new Digital Markets Act, which just went into effect. Apple's already been fined nearly $2 billion for its App Store policies, and that, too, stems from a lawsuit, this time by Spotify in 2019. So I guess what's happening is these regulatory bodies, especially in Europe, are following up on these lawsuits. They're taking several years, but they are really dropping the hammer on these guys. It's going to be interesting because the EU is much more aggressive and much more progressive in terms of its regulatory stance, and it's also much harder on privacy than in the US. Also, it has laws, which we don't, that are up to date. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. To me, and I was going to ask Lisa about this. Does this really matter, though, to the customers, or even does it even damage the brand name for these companies? Because these actions and these lawsuits investigations are going to take years to unravel and unpack.
At the end of the day, what Microsoft is doing is it's a very common go-to-market strategy. It's product bundles, and the intent of a product bundle, is to really increase sales, which it did, to improve customer satisfaction, which we have mixed data on, and also to improve competitive advantage, which is what the EU doesn't like. But at the end of the day, I think customers have the option to not use Teams. Now, Slack and Zoom and others are also saying it's not just the bundling of Teams, it's the interoperability problem that makes it difficult for those other platforms to work with other Microsoft tools. So Microsoft responded from a messaging perspective last year saying, all right, we're going to unbundle Teams in the EU and Switzerland. And the EC came back and said, insufficient. So dial back to April, just a few months ago, Microsoft said, okay, we'll unbundle this globally. I took a look at the market share because that's something that was interesting to me. And I was looking at what Gartner, Forrester, IDC were saying, and Microsoft does have significant market share in collaboration, cloud collaboration, unified communications. Slack and Zoom have pretty good market share as well. So I'm not sure that it's going to be a big hit for Microsoft. I think what Microsoft is doing from a messaging perspective is saying, is we're now going to give customers choice, which is what Mark Benioff was talking about on Twitter earlier this week, that it's about listening to what customers want. So I think it's going to be interesting. Microsoft has 10 weeks to respond to this, to see how they respond, what the message is coming up through their customer's voice that directs how they respond further.
Yeah, I was going to kind of switch to Mitchell. In terms of developers, does this muddy the waters at all, or does it impact them in any way, or do they just continue to forge forward?
I think it ties probably as much or more to the user experience, John. Okay. So, and part of what Lisa is referring to, if you kind of unpack bundling, right? There's bundling for pricing to get a better price. There's also bundling as in integrating it more tightly in the products. And because collaboration is such, kind of goes hand in hand with 365, whether you're using Office and you want to have a meeting and share a document, or you're talking about calendaring and email. If Teams is markedly easier to use or gets in the way of trying to use another service like Zoom, for example, or Slack or whatever it might be, that's when it really becomes an issue. Then they have a kind of an unfair advantage. We all expect Microsoft to be front and center about we have Teams, we'd love to have you use it, make it easy to use. It's kind of back in the search engine wars of what gets bundled with the browser, right? Which search engine do they make it hard to add it to that? It's kind of the same thing here. We're just talking about with collaborations for meetings. So I think it comes down to, if I have to go through 2 or 3 steps to set up a meeting using Zoom, and I can do it in one in Team, okay, is that because Zoom is harder to use, or is it because Microsoft has just made it harder for that for the end user to use it with the rest of them 365?
So I have some thoughts on this, as one might imagine. Enough with beating up the big tech vendors, right? Let's send Microsoft into battle. I'm reminded of the Monty Python, right? Just flesh wound. Let's cut off one arm, half a leg, just a flesh wound. Get ahead out there, because the Chinese and vendors from other parts of the world, they're rubbing their hands in glee, saying, "Okay, these guys, you give the capitalists enough rope, they'll hang themselves." And that is, we live in a world where a lot of buyers are looking to cut the amount of vendors they deal with. I want more bundles. I want more interoperability. I want one throat to choke instead of having to deal with 86 different vendors, right? This is not Internet Explorer automatically being put into Windows. And when you buy a Windows PC, you automatically got Internet Explorer. This is Teams as part of Office 365, which, by the way, also includes PowerPoint and Word and Excel and, a number of other optional bundled items in there. That's Microsoft's advantage for building out this Office, but it doesn't come default on the machine. You have to proactively download Office 365 the same way you have to proactively install Slack and or Zoom or Citrix, not Citrix, Cisco, WebEx, or whatever else you want to use for collaboration. I'm all for free and fair marketplaces, but I'm also all for that companies deserve to benefit from good work. And good work Microsoft has done here is they've transitioned what was a stodgy old Office program into a SaaS product, and they've bundled in some best-of-breed type of functionality. And I just think the EU is totally off base here. And John, to your point about does the end user care? When we're talking $20 billion, that's a lot of care. I don't care what the end user cares about. I mean, $20 billion is a lot of money.
I think also with the EU, just judging on some of the other rules and everything, one of their key areas is transparency. So if enough people complained and said, like, even though you said you're making the choice to download it, then that's going to raise the eyebrow. And it'll be also interesting because what Lisa said, I agree with as well, the messaging now behind it. Is that going to linger, that message, Microsoft is not being honest with you?
How are they not being honest, though?
Yeah, it's interesting to me. There's a certain irony with all these regulatory issues, and there's so many. I mean, there's not just in Europe, but especially also now in the U.S., is that the customers have never been happier with the products they have, I think, based on usage, based on their dependence on the products. So I guess what we now see is this pivot towards how competitors are hurt. And so what we see in this case with Slack and even the Spotify case involving Apple is the companies going to law enforcement and in a sense acting as a partner in prosecuting a case against their competitor. And I think that is actually the impetus for most of these investigations. It's actually coming from the third-party software developers.
Those are the people complaining.
And these are the people who are complaining. They are basically the driving force behind these investigations. It's not independently the Justice Department or FTC. I think they are very dependent on these third parties. And it takes a couple of years, but eventually it lands. Microsoft now is in hot water after years of kind of being unscathed. It was skating by. It was adhering by the rules, and now look where it finds itself.
I'm not a fan of this particular one. And I'm no Microsoft fanboy, but what they're done. I mean, and so what's next is Lotus isn't around anymore. But does someone else make a spreadsheet that says, bundling Excel in Office 365 gives Microsoft an unfair advantage, and we're going to hit them for that? What happens with Google? I mean, I'm surprised Google has already said that Office 365 is unfair because it competes with us. This goes against the spirit of what battles should be won in the marketplace by having a superior product, not by lobbying governments to handcuff, companies.
Well, I think there's a bit of regulatory regret, though, too, by some of the folks you mentioned, Alan, Internet Explorer, and I think about Netscape, dating myself, and Navigator, and maybe perhaps they think, not enough was done back in the late 90s, and look what happened in Netscape. We don't want this to happen again, but you're right. I mean, Teams is later to market. It did a phenomenal job. I mean, I use it as often as I use Slack or I use Zoom or WebEx. So in a sense, the spoils go to the victors who have the products that people embrace.
I'm sorry, Mitch. Let me just jump real quick. On the Internet Explorer one, yes, I was a big Netscape fan too. We even use Netscape Web Server. But you know what? So Mozilla was given every advantage, right, that Netscape didn't have. And it didn't win. It lost. You don't see many people using Firefox anymore. What did win was Google's product. And it's based on Chromium and irony of ironies, Microsoft's new Edge or whatever they call their browser is also a Chromium-based browser. And Google, I think, still dominates that market. So, the best of intentions by governing and regulatory agencies line the road to perdition, right? The world economy and the marketplace need to win out here. You just can't handicap these companies like that and expect them to remain competitive.
Well, to me, it seems that this is intersection of two lines, right? Regulatory and competitiveness. As soon as Microsoft catches up to, before they had Team, right? We were using every other product to do this. Now, with the addition of Teams, as that caught up with in functionality and usability, and people started adopting it, now the competitors go to the regulatory agencies and say, this is unfair, right? Because they're Microsoft and they're big and they've got captured the customers, et cetera. Well, to your point, Alan, that's part of the advantage that they have. The real question is, are they doing something that's truly unfair? Or is it just that, they're using our products and our product suites and it comes bundled with that? And beyond that, it's, just us competing in the marketplace. Or is Microsoft really doing something that's unfair? That's very unclear in this case. I haven't seen anything that says, here's the practice you're doing, like in an antitrust kind of suit. Here's the pricing, or here's the way you are boxing out the competition so they can't compete and work with your products.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm at a loss. But you know what? I think we've given it its 15 minutes of fame.
Or more.
Or more. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about, did Broadcom bite off more than it could chew in VMware, or was it maybe less than it expected to chew? We're going to talk about that. We're back here. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Cloud Native Now is the web's leading resource for the growing cloud native ecosystem. CloudNativeNow.com is your destination for news, thought leadership, features, and webinars on cloud-native architecture, Kubernetes, serverless, cloud-native application development, microservices, service mesh, cloud-native security, and more. Stay on the cutting edge of modern application development at Cloud Native Now.
Hi, everyone. Back here on Techstrong Gang. Our next topic for today involves our friends at Broadcom. And, they have been working and evolving the VMware portfolio, and they recently came out with a functionality of streamlined DevOps workflows. And actually, Mitch, you know a lot about this particular one. Why don't you take it?
Sure. Let me kind of kick things off. VMware is in the news for a lot of topics, for a lot of reasons. After being acquired by Broadcom, they made an announcement they're coming out with actually rebranding Vsphere as Cloud Foundation. Yeah. And that term is something you see in other cloud services that kind of implies things like patterns and architectures and blueprints for how to do things, templates, if you will. And that's precisely what they've done, is create templates that make it kind of easier for DevOps teams, and I would imagine platform engineers to also self-provision their environments for doing development testing, et cetera, on top of their private cloud. So it's, we're seeing VMware, in addition to its strength in the operational kind of side of the world, whether it's in private cloud or in public cloud somewhat, but also trying to get into the DevOps workflow, into the software development workflow. And so it isn't just about containerizing your application and building your own environments. You could be doing that on top of VMware, vSphere, in effect. For development test all the way into production. So it's interesting to see that they're trying to move up. Of course, they have Tanzu Kubernetes, and this ties into the grid service that's available for that. So VMware continues to expand and kind of move up the stack somewhat, and this seems to be a good move for that. I'm curious, Lisa, your perspective on this too, given Broadcom kind of in the market and VMware being acquired by Broadcom in the market, and what the perceptions are, and maybe what some of the things is this going to help them with their customers?
Interestingly, I go back to the 4 P's of marketing here: pricing, positioning are the first 2 things that jumped out at me. Obviously, consolidating 168 products, 9,000 SKUs, and they were very vocal in the last few months about, we made it really challenging for our customers to be able to integrate. We kind of left our customers up to being the systems integrators, and they didn't really get that single consistent experience. So they've been very vocal in their messaging about the challenges that they're aware that they delivered to the audience. So I thought that was a wise, transparent view. But I also go back to Broadcom's acquisition strategy in its past, kind of the acquire X sort of thing there. So we know some of the things that they're doing is they want to make consistent changes to deliver that consistent customer experience, which is what customers want. They are also updating to a subscription model. So a big change there for VMware. And that their go-to-market strategy to me shows Broadcom is listening to the existing VMware customers. With that said, we know Hawk 10 has been very vocal about we're going to be investing heavily in R&D, which to me signifies not a lot of investment in marketing. So I think what they're going to be focused on here is preservation of existing customers. I see them working on cross-sell opportunities here as they make things easier, more consistent, and really respond to what the DevOps teams want. But I think they're going to be focused on helping the most profitable customers stay. And I don't see them really going after with this net new logos.
Fair. Look, with all due respect to Broadcom and VMware has issues, right? And probably the biggest issue, I think, from VMware is the move in the market from just infrastructure as a service on top of a hypervisor to true cloud native platform as a service. And Tanzu is their bet for cloud native and Kubernetes and, platform as a service. But the bulk of their revenue and their customers are using what was vSphere and the other, hypervisor-based products. And so, I think Broadcom knew this going in, that they were buying in what, in essence, is a diminishing asset in the marketplace if they didn't revitalize things and kind of modernize it, if you will. So I think this represents an attempt at doing that. There's two pieces of it. Number one is getting Tanzu bigger, better, having a bigger chunk of the cloud native market. And number two is, it's more than just renaming. I think it's making Cloud Foundation, if that's the new word, more relevant to today's cloud audience. And whether that is going to influence DevOps teams or workflows or make it more cool, if you will, to the user base is remains to be seen. I'm not 100% sold on it.
Seems to me they've got to win over the platform engineering crowd, because that's more and more who's providing these platforms to development and test multiple environments, which also in some cases do DevOps. They manage the DevOps tools as well, but that seems who I would go after.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't see that I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
Oh, no, I think he's right. Ultimately, probably the goal is to provide the platform engineers and application developers with a frictionless experience. The one thing I really quick aside, whenever I hear the words Broadcom and VMware, I get triggered into thinking about user confusion and pricing, fretting. And I think one of the goals here is to make pricing for VMware software more consistent across multiple platforms, because there exists this perception that the company raised prices when it eliminated perpetual licenses for VMware software. So if that's their ultimate goal, perhaps there's a lot of value in that.
I would help. Well, they also, besides trying to make pricing more uniform, they also, I don't know if it was open source or they just made free a lot of the kind of VMware, the consumer, if you will, the products that they don't want to play in, right? They're trying to streamline, I think, the VMware product line to concentrate on, make their bets where they think they'll get the greatest return.
Yeah, the desktop products that now are free, right? Essentially made for individual users. That's not what their bread and butter is. It's in the data center.
And no, they're giving them away for free. It's clearly, and that's where Broadcom plays, right? That's where their hardware is too, in the data centers and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see. And I also, Mitchell, you and I discussed this. I guess it was on the DevOps Chat podcast we just recorded. it'll be interesting to see how long a runway they give Tanzu to make real headway in the cloud native space, right? Because you know the old saying, if you're not in the top three, get the heck out. And so if Tanzu's not in the top three, how long is Broadcom going to stay in there?
Well, that's another reason why I think you have to push beyond IT ops or cloud ops for VMware, because those decisions don't usually get made by IT ops. That's made as part of the kind of the IT or the application stack, right? That we're running for Kubernetes or running other tools within. Again, tends to go back to platform engineering. So I think they've got to win over that crowd in a big way to really, I think they could make substantial headway if they did that.
Agreed.
Well, VMware Explorer is coming up in Alan. VMware Explorer Legacy show coming up in just about 6 weeks or so. So it'll be interesting there to see what additional messaging and positioning we hear. Mitch, to your comment, are they going to be expanding their target audience? Are they going to be going up that stack? That maybe we'll find out more. I suspect we will in about 6 weeks' time.
Great point.
Well, I hope we'll have some Futurum folks there.
I'll bet we will.
Good. I'm looking forward to seeing that. All right, let's take a quick break here on Techstrong Gang. Coming back, we were lucky to have Bonnie Schneider here. She is our sustainability and green IT expert, and we're going to hear from her regarding Nvidia. Just give us a moment. Hey, we're back here on Techstrong Gang. As I mentioned right before the break, we're really lucky to have Bonnie Schneider here as part of our Techstrong Gang, and she's been part of Techstrong now for a year or more. Bonnie's background, if you don't know, is as a professional meteorologist. She's also a multiple-time author on climate change and what's going on in the world, and she's been manning the EcoTech Insights desk here, which is really around sustainability, green IT initiatives, et cetera. And, she's developed a real expertise in this. And at some point you cross the chasm from going to talking to people and learning about a subject to becoming an expert on the subject. And given Bonnie's background in meteorology and climate change and sustainability, the natural progression is for her to, in and of herself, to become an analyst expert in the field. And that's what she is. So you're going to see a lot of new content from Bonnie around her opinions on issues around sustainability and green IT. And she's here to tell you about her first one. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Thanks, Alan. Great introduction. Well, we've been talking a lot over the past week of Nvidia being the world's most valuable company. Now, I know that news teetered a little bit earlier this week, but still, it's their rise has been monumental to follow. So I was curious to see about the sustainability initiatives that the CEO Jensen Huang is taking on with the introduction of Blackwell GPUs and to see how that all shapes up. So I took a closer look at Nvidia.
Hi everyone, I'm Bonnie Schneider with your EcoTech Analyst Insights. Nvidia's ascendance to the world's most valuable publicly listed company highlights its dominance in the AI chip market. But this rapid rise also raises questions about AI's environmental impact. For example, this year alone, Nvidia's high-end microchips are projected to surpass the power consumption of entire small nations. This presents a significant sustainability challenge. How can tech innovation align with eco-responsibility? Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang offers a unique perspective. He argues that the use of millions of AI GPUs will actually reduce overall power consumption. The CEO says this is achievable through accelerating computations and enabling more efficient inferencing. Nvidia's upcoming Blackwell GPUs will consume up to 1 kilowatt each. Despite their high-powered usage, they are designed to complete AI tasks faster, potentially saving on overall energy use. Nvidia is also leveraging generative AI in their intelligent product recommendation tool, which helps create digital twins for complex industrial products, optimizing design and minimizing waste. Can Nvidia maintain its top spot in AI while effectively managing its carbon footprint? The ongoing efforts of the world's most valuable company suggest a promising path forward. Nvidia's balance of AI innovation with sustainability will be key to its long-term success and future global impact.
As you can see, Jensen Huang does have a very innovative way of seeing how energy use and AI can actually intertwine, especially when processes are done faster. In his opinion, you're using less energy. He also talked about as well using AI to create off-grid energy. So I think this thinking out of the box, rather than looking at it, the glass is half empty, its glass is half full, is part of the perspective. We're going to use AI to do great things. Yes, it's going to tap into our energy grid, but perhaps we can use AI to create additional grids, to look for power sources we never even thought were possible.
Interesting. You know, to me, it sounds a little like alchemy. We're going to turn lead into gold.
Yeah.
But that's me. Gang, anybody else have anything to say on that one?
I have a question for Bonnie. And by the way, we love Bonnie and love the work that you're doing. We're so privileged to have you here. I'm curious your sense of the credibility of your conversation with him about this. Now, obviously, there's messaging and telling the story, and sometimes there's more story than fact. What's your sense of it? Do you think there's a lot of credibility behind what they're doing?
Yeah, I really do, especially when you look at their rapid rise to success. I think we don't know yet. You know, one of the things that's tough about this is that it's very hard to measure the amount of energy AI uses, how to track it. That's still being discovered and figured out. So it's sort of this is a good point in history to say what he's saying, that, you know, this is actually going to save us energy, because we don't really have the data to say that he's wrong. So I think, judging on his success so far, that we're likely to see that. And one of the other things what's fascinating about NVIDIA is all the partnerships that they're doing with different energy companies, you know, to stay on top of it, to do real-time monitoring, as well, to get the answers for that. But using AI also as a part of climate solutions is another big area, I think, that a lot of these big tech companies are getting into and will continue to do. You know, we just had a report, Alan, we're talking about this with Google in Finland, how they're doing a state-of-the-art new data center that's going to help to heat the entire community around it. So it is interesting to see the innovations.
It's a really smart story, Bonnie. One quick question. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
Quick question I want to ask you about was the peers of NVIDIA who are relatively older have been grappling with this. I'm thinking about Apple and Google and their efforts in terms of environmental responsibility. Do you think NVIDIA, because it is relatively younger, has some sort of advantage? You mentioned the embrace of AI, but maybe there's technology that's come along that makes it easier for them to address the carbon footprint.
Yeah, I do. And I think with this Blackwell chip in particular, it's projected to be 25 times more efficient than any other previous model. So they're going into this saying, yes, we're using the AI, but what we're developing processes everything faster. And like I was saying earlier, that will in turn use less energy. So I absolutely think that.
You know, John, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, thanks. I took a look at NVIDIA's FY24 sustainability report, and the things, kind of Mitch, to your point, and Bonnie, to yours, that struck me were all of the customer examples they provided when they say NVIDIA accelerated computing saves energy. And they've got data there that shows that before it was consuming 10x to 20x more cost and energy. They also talked about, to Bonnie's point, training AI consumes energy, but applying AI saves energy. They talked about some customers there, Portland General Electric, for example, how they're using Nvidia AI inside electric meters to direct more renewable power resources to the power grid. I think it struck me as the numbers, the customer, the proof points that they had was quite transparent, and I think lends a lot of credibility to what we're doing.
I think you're right. I think that transparency is key, because it would be one thing if they were to argue, well, we're not really using a lot of energy. We know that that's not the case. So taking this approach and seeing how AI can be in turn to be used in tandem with a power company to optimize energy is key. And I think they're leading in this space for sure.
They are. Your point, Bonnie, them being a newer company, a younger company, as opposed, we know a lot of other folks who are coming or working on coming to market with their chips, right, with AI chips. But take an Intel, for example, that's doing their own fab now. It's one thing for Intel to come out with a story around green and sustainability for their AI chip, but that's in the context of the larger Intel story, right, and how green is Intel. It seems to me Nvidia is in a position to really claim a space in sustainability and what they're doing, that they can differentiate from others because they can holistically talk about that story much greater than an existing chip company.
I think that makes sense, especially when you think of who's leading in sustainability. Typically, Apple comes to mind. But you're right. I think that as a younger company and as a leader, of course, in the AI industry, for sure, they could definitely have the opportunity to do that.
And they also talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of their sustainability program. And I was impressed to read that 50% of their board of directors is made up of racially or gender diverse people. So they're, maybe as a newer company, they're taking that well-rounded ESG approach, which does include DE&I.
They're definitely a child of their times. But before we saint them, okay, confer sainthood upon them.
So Nvidia?
Yeah, same Nvidia. But, before we do that, let's also remember a large part of this is a knee-jerk reaction to the fact that their chips are blowing up power, and for a good reason, right? Everybody wants AI. Everybody wants to run AI calculations and, computations. And all of those AI usages and with these chips are blowing up, our ability to support them with electricity and heat dissipation and, the whole data center space. If, they, to a certain extent, they created a problem and they're now trying to solve it.
They're trying to get ahead of the problem that they're creating.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Right. Yeah. And, there's a little bit of self-service going on here. And I hope no one in the EU hears that and starts an investigation over it. But
one of the competitors has to go to the EU. And
Intel will probably go there and say, "Hey, Nvidia is unfairly heating the planet."
So tune in tomorrow. We'll be talking about that.
There's so much unknown. We know that our electric grid is aging, and we just don't know yet how much can it handle. And I think that's going to be something that we'll see going forward. And if you look at what Jensen Huang says, that it looks like the AI will help solve that problem too. So I agree with you. There has to be some balance there.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just close this one out with, what? Our friends at Vshpere, Daniel Newman, CEO of Vshpere, has had several interviews with Jensen. They are available. I think they're on the 6.5 Media site, if that Vshpere Group site. So if you want to, hear from Jensen directly, I direct you to go check those out as well. We're going to take a break and we're going to come back with an Andy Rooney kind of segment here from our good friend, ROELBOB, Bob Reselman. We'll be right back here. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Ever wonder what the tech brothers who have made a lot of money in technology do with it all? Bob Reselman does. In fact, he thinks that buying big mansions and islands in the Caribbean is just the low-hanging fruit. He thinks there's more to be had. Let's take a listen.
All right, so this is a story about tech bros, and it goes like this. Elon Musk's net worth in 2023 was about $232 billion. And in 2024, Tesla is going to give him another $46 billion in a pay package. That's a lot of money. How much money? Well, for little old me, if I were to spend $1 million a year, it would take me 232,400 years to spend it all. almost 250,000 years to spend that amount of money. That's longer than Homo sapiens have been walking around planet Earth. But it may sound like a lot of money, but I don't think Elon Musk has it lying around in cash. He probably has a lot of it in non-liquid assets. But that doesn't mean he couldn't buy some serious stuff. So, for example, he could buy an aircraft carrier. Right, a Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, Gerald Ford class aircraft carrier, costs $37 billion. That's a drop in a bucket for Musk. Take a loan, put up some of his Tesla stock, and he's rowing the seven seas in an aircraft carrier. There might not be any planes on the aircraft carrier, but who cares? He has the aircraft carrier, go forward, Elon. Now, I don't think Elon wants an aircraft carrier. I think what he wants is a lot of satellites, and he has them. Elon Musk has about 1,655 satellites circling planet Earth. That's more than the Chinese Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, and the European Space Agency combined. In other words, Musk and his companies are just as big a player in space as NASA. And maybe, if he wanted to, he could have his own space force. He has all the stuff. He has the money, he has the technology, and he could hire the people, send them into space in his own rockets, and he's patrolling planet Earth. Now, here's something to think about. What happens to the public space when private individuals take over? What happens when the tech bros have more spaceships, satellites, and communication infrastructure than a sovereign state? Let's go one step further. What happens when these tech bros become a sovereign state? I mean, if it walks like a duck, and if it talks like a duck, then it's a sovereign state. Oh, no. I mean, it's a duck. I mean, a private corporation could never become a sovereign state, could it? Oh, I don't know. Maybe that's something to think about.
Yeah, I love hearing from Bob and ROELBOB. He has a unique view of the world. I would say it's not just mansions and islands. They also buy beautiful resorts, as is the case here in Boca Raton. Not going to get into it. But thank you, Bob, for that. And thank you for watching us on Techstrong Gang. You know, we're going 5 days a week, and that means tomorrow, Friday, we'll be back with a whole new show. Our gang will be assembled and topics of the day to be discussed. But until then, John, Mitch, Lisa, Bonnie, thanks for joining. I'm Alan Shimel. You've just watched the Techstrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.